As time passed, Janaka became anxious whether he would ever see his daughter married and settled. Since the condition once made could not be withdrawn, no one on earth seemed worthy of approaching Shiva's bow. Janaka sighed, I tremble when I think of Sita's future, and question my own judgment in linking her faith with this mighty divine heirloom in our house. Do not despair, said Vishwamitra soothingly. How do you know it was not a divine inspiration that gave you the thought? In all other words, in all other worlds, if is there anyone who can tackle this bow, the very sight of which Shiva's hand made earning gods and godlings tremble and collapse, until Shiva put it away and re-announced its use. With your permission, you may we see it. Janaka said, I have brought it here. It has lain in its shed too long. Who knows, moving it out may change all our fates. He called on his tenements to fetch the bough. The tenants hesitated, and he ordered, let the army be engaged for the task if necessary. After all, this spot is sanctified by the sacred rites recently performed, and the bow is fit to be brought in here. The bow was placed in a carriage on pairs of wheels and arrived drawn by the vast number of men. During its passage from the shed through the streets, a crowd followed it. It was so huge that no one could comprehend it at one glance. Is this a bow or the mountain called Muryu, which churned the ocean of milk in ancient times? People marveled. What target is there to receive the arrow shot out of this bow, even if someone fits its strings? Wondered some. If Janaka meant seriously to find a son in law, he should have waived his condition. How unwise of him. Rama looked at his master, Vishwamitra, nodded as if to say, try it. As Rama approached the bow with slow dignity, the onlookers held their breath and watched. Some prayed silently for him. Some commented how cruel. This supposed sage is not ashamed to put the delicate, marvelous youth to this harsh trial. The king is perverse and cruel to place this godlike youth in the predicament. If he was serious about it, should have just placed Sita's hand in his instead of demanding this acrobatic feat. The king's aim is to keep Sita with her forever. This is one way of never facing separation. If this man fails, we will all jump into the fire, commented some young women who were love stricken at the sight of Rama. If he fails, Sita is sure to immolate herself, and we will all follow her example. While they were speculating thus, Rama approached the bow. Some of the onlookers, unable to bear the suspense, closed their eyes and prayed for his success, saying, if he fails to bring the ends of this bow together, what is to happen to the maiden? What they missed because they shut their eyes was to note how swiftly Rama picked up the bow, tugged the string taut, and brought the tips together. They were startled when they heard a deafening report caused by the cracking of the bow at its arch, which could not stand the pressure of Rama's grip. The atmosphere was suddenly relaxed. The gods showered down flowers and blessings, clouds parted, and precipitated rains. The ocean tossed up in the air all the rare treasures from its depths. The sages cried, Janaka's tribulations and trials are ended. Music filled the air. The citizens garlanded, embraced, and anointed each other with the perfumes and sprinkled down sandalwood powder in the air. People donned their best clothing, gathered at the palace gates and public squares, and danced and sang without any restraint, flutes and pipes and drums created a dim over the loud chants and songs from many throats. God and the goddesses, watching the happy scenes below, assumed human form, mixed with the crowds, and shared their joy. The beauty of our royal bridegroom can never be fully grasped unless one is blessed with 1,000 eyes, commented the woman. See his brother, how very handsome. Blessed parents to have begotten such sons. Sita had secluded herself and was unaware of the latest development. She moved from the bed to bed for lack of comfort, a lay and lay beside a fountain on the slab of a moonstone, the coolest bed they could find her. Even there she had no peace, since the lotus blooms in the pool of the fountain teased her mind, reminding her of the shape of his eyes or his complexion. She grumbled, "No peace anywhere. I am deserted. My mind tortures me with reminders. What use are they if I can't even know where to look for him? What sort of man can he be to cause all this torment and just pass on doing to alleviate it? A regal appearance, but actually practicing sorcery." His torturous reflections were interrupted by the arrival of a maid. Instead of bowing and saluting her mistress as normal, she pirouetted around singing snatches of love songs. Sita sat up and commanded, "Be quiet. Are you intoxicated?" The maid answered, "The whole country is intoxicated." "How would you know, my God, good mistress, if you lock yourself in and mope and moan?" She went on to explain in a rush of incoherence. The king of Ayodhya, son, broad shouldered and a god of the earth. No one saw it happen. He was so quick and swift, he pressed, so they may say, one end of his feet and seized the other with his hand and drew the string, and oh, intoxicated beauty, what are you saying? When Sita understood what had happened, she stood up, her breast heaving. She held herself erect as she said, "Do you know if this is the same man who struck me down with a look as he passed along the street? If it is someone else, I will end my life." When the initial excitement subsided, King Janaka sought Vishwamitra's advice. "What shall I do? I suddenly find myself in an unexpected situation. Is it your desire that I should send for the priest and the astrologer and fix the earliest date for the wedding, or send a message to Jashrata and wait for his convenience?" Vishwamitra, Vishwamitra replied, "Dispatch the messenger with the auspicious news immediately and invite Darshwata formally." Janaka at once retired in order to compose a proper invitation to Darshwatra with the help of his court poets and epistle writers, and dispatched it. In due course, Janakas and missionaries presented the epistle at Joshwatra's court. Joshwatra ordered his reader to receive the epistle and read it out. The message gave an account of all that had happened from the time Rama had left Ayodhya up to the snapping of Shiva's bow. Darshwatra heaped presents of messengers and commented lightheartedly, "Tell them in Mithila that we heard the sound of the bow snapping." He then passed orders, "Let the announcement in appropriate language be made widely that King Janaka has invited for Rama's wedding every man, woman, and child in our capital. Let those able to travel to Mithila start at once in advance of us." Professional announcers on elephants, accompanied with drums, carried the king's proclamation to every nook and corner of the capital. The road to Mithila was crowded with men, women, and children. When the huge mass began to assemble, move down the road, the world looked suddenly shrunken in size. Elephants bearing pennants and flags, their foreheads covered with gold patches, horses prancing and trotting, and a variety of ox-drawn carriages and chariots were on the move, in addition to the vast throng on foot. The sun's rays were caught and reflected by the thousands of white satin umbrellas and the brilliant decorations of the army men, heavy-breasted women clad in gashmere like drapes set on elephants, their necklaces swaying with the movement of the elephants, flanked by warriors bearing swords and bows on horseback. The poet is especially happy and detailed when he describes the mood and the activity of the young in the festive crowd. A youth followed a carriage at a trot, his eyes fixed on the window at which a face had appeared a little while ago. Hoping for another glimpse of the face, another young man could not take his eye off the lightly covered breast of a girl in a chariot. He tried to keep ahead of it, constantly looking back over his shoulder, unaware of what was in front, and the bumping the hind quarters of the elephants on the march. When a girl inadvertently slipped down the back of the horse, another young man picked her up, but instead of setting her down after the rescue, he journeyed on with her in his arms. Another went along, brooding and reflecting as he gazed on his beloved. Couples who had had a quarrel over some detail of the arrangements of this journey walked side by side without speaking, the woman not caring to wear a flower in her hair, but only a frown on her face, yet close enough to each other to avoid separation. One youth who was not spoken to was agitated by the messages conveyed by the elegant eyes of a damsel, said, "You won't speak, but surely when you cross the river you'll want my strong arms to carry you. And how shall I know if you don't speak to me? I know that you object only to speak, not to my touch. Inevitable, you'll need that when we come to the river's edge." Camels bearing enormous loads went along with parched throats until they could find the bitter margosa leaves, since they avoid tender greenery, and were thirsty again after chewing them. Like men who look only for wine to quench their thirst, which again produces more thirst, sturdy menfolk bore on their shoulders gifts and supplies for their journey. Brahmins who practiced austerities followed, remaining aloof, afraid alike to walk amongst the elephants for fear of being jostled, and in the areas where there were women who might distract their inner vision. Some hopped along lightly on their toes in order not to trample on any live creature on the ground. Others held their fingers over their nostrils, both to perform breathing control and keep their fingers from touching their nether portions, while their minds were fixed on God. The noise of rolling chariots, wheels, trumpets, and drums, and the general din made it impossible for anyone to hear what anyone else was saying. After a while, people moved along dumbly, communicating with each other only by signs, their feet, their feet raising an enormous trail of dust, bullocks drawing wagons loaded with baggage, excitement by the noise of drums suddenly snapped their yokes and ran helter skelter, adding to the melee, leaving the baggage scattered on the road. Elephants, when they noticed a tank or a pond charging away for a plunge, remained submerged in the water of their white tusks. Musicians sat on horseback playing their instruments and singing. Oh. I'll just finish this page. Behind this army, the king's favorites in the women's apartments followed. Surrounded by 1,000 attendants, Queen Kaikii came in her palanquin. Next came Sumutra, accompanied by thousands of attendants. Surrounded by her own musicians came Kausala, mother of Rama. She had also in her company several dwarfs and hunchbacks and other freaks, but her main companions were 60,000 women of great beauty and accomplishment who followed her in a variety of vehicles. In a white palanquin studded with pearls, sage Vashita, chief of mentor at the court, followed, surrounded by thousands of Brahmins and priests. So this is the top of page 83 that we're stopping at.